David Levy. David Levy brings more than 25 years of practical experience helping thousands of family caregivers find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse, a parent, or a loved one who is no longer able to care for him or herself, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, today's edition of Caregiver Reality and your host, David Levy.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. You're listening to the Caregiver Reality Show. I'm your host, David Levy, gerontologist. I'm here with my co-host, Paul. Good evening, Paul.
And good evening, David, and good evening to our audience.
Right. It's been another exciting week.
In the world of caregiving, every week's exciting.
Absolutely. There's never, ever a dull moment in caregiving.
This has been your week.
Yes, it has. As we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, my wife went in this morning for a total knee replacement. And we were all set because she was going to have the surgery done, which was done, and then get a pain pump so that because she's very sensitive to pain, not that most people aren't.
What's a pain pump, David?
A pain pump is a piece of equipment that they feed down one of your arteries or veins, typically an artery, that actually dispenses the medication, the Novocaine, for argument's sake, or lidocaine, whatever it may be, but one of the pain killers, all right, directly into the area where the surgery was done. So I was very excited because this was a way, as I've said in the past, she does not tolerate narcotics well. And so this was the plan. We got into surgery today, not we, but the surgeon, and I got a phone call at 9:30 to say the knee went very well. We couldn't get the pain pump in. They did the incision, but they couldn't feed it down the artery, and so she came out of surgery, and they have been trying to deal with her pain in very traditional ways. They're injecting it into her intravenous solutions and trying to give her medication, but we walk a very tight line because her sensitivity to narcotics can create a crescendo of other things that might happen. So our best laid plan, as in everything, went upside down. I went to see her today, obviously, when she was finally out of recovery, and she was in real agony, and she had packed for 3 days in the hospital as though she was going to the Four Seasons for a month. And I said to her, I don't think we need all of this at the hospital, but I did make arrangements, as we've told the audience, for her to go to a very fine nursing home afterwards because the physical therapy and the occupational therapy is something that she's going to need. And it's just something we couldn't handle at home or at her daughter's home very effectively. So when I walked in, and I had clearly told this to the doctor, and I said, please let them know that she's going to, in this particular case, a very fine facility in our area called Heartland. And all of a sudden, I see the sign in the room, and it says, hospital to home. I said, whoa, who called an audible on me? So I went out, and I said, where was the setup to be able to do there to nursing home? Well, we didn't get any information, even though we had made it very, very clear. So I walked over, as everybody needs to do when you have a loved one in a facility. You've got to be a great advocate. So I asked for the discharge planner. That's the person that makes arrangements for what is going to happen to you when you leave. And I went over and I introduced myself. And she said, who are you? And I said, well, I'm the husband, but more importantly, I'm the designated healthcare surrogate, because without that, husband has a very limited meaning inside a facility, especially a hospital. And there's more to that. But anyway, I said to her, she's not going home. Well, she said, I haven't even come to talk to you people. And it was you people.
I love that, you people.
You people. Well, I guess that's hospital speak for husband and wife. And I said, well, you don't have to worry about this one. I've made arrangements, and I named the two administrators at the facility who she knows well, and I said it's all set up. I've gotten her a certain room. I've talked to the PT and occupational therapy people, and it's all set. Oh, as though I had taken away a toy. And I said, so what is it that you need from me? Well, could you sign this paper? And I said, I'd be more than happy to. I did that, and I said, see, I'm just on your team, and I'm just trying to make life easy. And she finally realized it, and she said, thank you. And which I said, you're very welcome, because one has to respect the fact that you're inside their house, not inside yours. And so you have to be very careful how you deal. But we'll go on, and I have another interesting story to tell, which will play out tomorrow, but I will inform the audience. But in the meantime, you're listening to us on WBZT 1230 a.m. I'm sorry, folks. I've been up since 4:30 this morning, so excuse me. And if you want to speak to us, we're at 800-899-0267. If you're local in the area, it's 561-844-6167. And always, you can see us anytime you want at www.caregiverreality.com. Just click on live show. You can either catch us streaming right now or in the archive 30 minutes after we're done, because Freddie, our producer, is so good that as soon as we're done, it gets posted. He's shaking his hand like he's not so sure, but
and let's not forget iHeartRadio.
Oh, and iHeartRadio, all 26,000 stations around the world. All you have to do is go click on iHeart, click on BZT, and you can listen to it wherever you are, whether you're in the Ukraine, Afghanistan, or just around the corner. iHeartRadio covers the world. And they're a great organization, and they're growing by leaps and bounds. And so America and the world and South Florida, it's been a busy week for caregiving for yours truly. And yesterday, Paul and I had the opportunity, and I'll let him speak to it in a moment, but we were at one of the local law schools, and we were speaking to a class of future elder law attorneys. And we were bringing to them the message about family caregiving and how important it is and how valuable it will be, much more than your traditional areas of the law, because in an aging society, what we had to explain to them was that it's more than just paperwork. It's understanding who your client is and what your client is involved in. And I think when we left, we had made a fairly significant impression, because we really got great questions. And not only that, but one of the students came up to us and said, I would be an unpaid intern just to work for you guys. So I said, here's my card. Let us know. Would love to educate another individual. Paul, what was your take on last night?
It really was a great evening. These young people are going to become great attorneys. They have such great minds and such a desire to do what is right. And they really didn't understand what elder law was all about, and they really didn't understand what caregiving was about, particularly the extent and the extent and the scope that caregiving actually is in this country, and how dependent people are on those caregivers, and how important their role as future elder law attorneys are going to be. It's actually one of the few areas of the law that is underserved right now and is going to continue to grow.
Well, with an aging population and with the expansion of keeping people alive longer, not only for longevity, but with chronic illness, we know that caregiving has to grow. And right now we've got 50 or 60 million people in this country who are family caregivers, those who are taking care of another who can no longer do for themselves what they once did. And that number is only going to continue to expand. So as we explained to them last night, it's not a market, it is the market.
And as we asked the students, how many, there were about 20 people, I would say, in the room
I would
yesterday.
say that was about the size of the class.
We asked how many people are currently caregivers, and about 25% of the hands
went up. And they were active caregivers for their parents and their grandparents. One happened to have been for a sister that had MS. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting because it was exactly what I thought it would be. And just this week, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics announced that right now, 31% of the workplace is over the age of 55, which is an incredible number. And so when the other statistics that come forward to say there's 35 to 40% caregiving in the workplace, and
Hard to ignore that.
it's very hard to ignore that because the impact in the workplace is so profound. Anybody that thinks, and we say this often, that caregivers leave the house at 8 o'clock in the morning and hang up their caregiving coat and don't pick it up till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I have a bridge to sell you. All right, it's located in Brooklyn, and I have the exclusive listing on it. But back to serious, caregiving is a role, and just because you're not in the house doesn't mean you're not just as impacted. And having to make some determinations as to how well you can do your job while trying to guide the ship, so to speak, for mom, for grandma, for a spouse, is a very, very difficult thing to do both at the same time. And one of the things that's happened in the workplace here in the United States and elsewhere is because they are so other-directed for a chunk of the day, even though it's in pieces, productivity, which is the amount of output that one can expect from any individual, drops dramatically. And simply acknowledging the caregiver and giving them some help in the workplace would return so much productivity to the bottom line that we would be amazed what we're losing to caregiving by failure to recognize the caregiver who's working.
But the problem there is they're afraid to let the boss know that they are caregivers because the fear is, there goes my promotion, there goes the possibility of advancement, I may lose my job. What if I'm being told not to make those plans during the work time? People are afraid, and the consequences that it may carry as they fulfill the responsibilities as caregiver while they are still employed.
They're really the hidden worker. All right, they're trying to run two jobs at the same time, out of the same place, one that they're being paid for and one that they're not. And the fear of being found, as it were, is really tremendous. I know, Paul, you have in front of you part of a piece that came out the other day on caregiving in America. It was called Heading to the Cliff. And I think there was a woman in there who made the point that when she has to do caregiving, she has to decide between her job and what she has to do for her family, and she lives in constant fear of being found out as a caregiver. And I would imagine, and I could safely say, there are millions and millions and millions of people faced with that same predicament every day.
Two of them in this room.
Yes, although I work for myself. So
Worst kind of a boss.
I know, and I'm tougher on me than anybody, but I recognize that I had to give up today some of the things I normally would have done because my wife was in the hospital. Now, anybody that has a loved one in the hospital has to make some arrangement, but when you're dealing with that situation day in and day out, your whole life is framed around what is it that you have to do for that person that you're responsible for, as well as maintain yourself, earn a living, try and have some time for yourself, some peace and quiet for yourself, and still maintain the duality or that dual job of earning a living and being a great caregiver.
And let's not forget, manage those feelings of frustration, anger, resentment, guilt. All of them come hand in hand with that role and responsibility of being a caregiver. And the fact that you're sitting at a desk or you're at an assembly line is not going to take those feelings away. The only thing that will help is understanding how to do it better.
Well, or how to make it understandable. And so that it's not so much that you can do a better job, because maybe you're doing the very best that you can, but at least it allows you the comfort of knowing that what you're doing may be the best you can do and that there's no perfection in caregiving. And just like this morning, we had everything laid out. Not that that was pure caregiving. It happened in a medical circumstance. But just when you plan for things, they go upside down.
And typical.
Very typical.
Not the exception.
No. And so while we were doing the law class last night, Friday I was doing an elder care mediation training course. And
Why don't you describe what that is for
all
our
right, well,
audience?
attorneys, psychologists, and others who want to branch out and use their expertise, many of them turn to the field of mediation, which is the practice of bringing two parties together that have a problem and working out a solution that both of them don't like but really makes everything work.
That's typically a legal type of an issue, like a divorce or a contract.
Well, it
dispute.
doesn't even have to be that. In small claims court, where you get a lot of training in mediation when you're first doing it, the typical thing is a guy bought a load of fish. I didn't like the fish. It wasn't fresh. I'm not paying you. I gave you the best fish I had, and you owe me money. All right? Well, the judge doesn't want to hear that. He's not there to arbitrate over herring. And so automatically in small claims court, at least here in Florida, they send you off with a mediator who goes in and says, look, guys, all right, we can either resolve this right now. Nobody has to know anything further about it. You can settle on whatever terms you like, and it'll be completely confidential. Or we go back to the hanging judge, and whatever the decision is, neither of you are going to like it much more than what we can work out here. The difference and the distinction between elder care mediation and being a mediator, let's say, where you're an attorney or a contractor and your specialty is building buildings, and all of a sudden there's a problem, the building wasn't built right, and one side says it's the builder's fault, and the other one says it's the owner's fault, the third one says the architect didn't design it correctly. And you got to get all the parties to the table and then resolve what the issues are, and it can be millions and millions of dollars. The problem with elder care mediation, and it only is a field that started in the last few years, I had to convince the people that taught me family mediation that there was a place for caregiving. And the woman that runs the operation that I teach at, I said for many years I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me because I had somebody that I was caring for, and I didn't know what to do. And I realized I had nobody to turn to. So I called David, which was unique in that, I was a part of her life. And then I realized what it was in elder care that a mediator really does. And it's not that you have two sides that are clearly defined. When I don't like the fish, I know that I didn't buy good fish and I'm not going to pay you. When it comes to caregiving, many times you have family conflict and a whole bunch of issues that nobody knows exactly where to line up. And so in elder care mediation, rather than having two opposing sides, you typically have a family that needs some direction, as well as having somebody keep things under control. One of the things as I've gone on in my career, I had attended Eckerd University a few years back and got certified in family conflict dynamics. And there really is a whole different world to how families relate to one another versus the way business relates to one another. And when you have families that have to make decisions today about mom, and you've got, let's say, a son and a daughter or two daughters that haven't liked one another since they fought in the sandbox, and now you have to attempt to put that aside. We're here today to deal with mom, not why the two of you don't like one another.
Well, David, I know from my past professional life, one of the worst case scenarios is when an event occurred and the two children had to fly in on a Friday, and they had to get everything set back because they both had to get to work no later than Tuesday. And what should have been taking weeks or months to plan out discussions, now all of a sudden has to get done
in a day.
In a day or 2 days, and they basically don't like each other to begin with, in some cases.
Well, and not only that, but now you're tasked with the responsibility of what do you really do? How much experience have you had in buying a nursing home, in finding an assisted living facility? We were having that discussion last night with the class,
yes.
And there are great assisted living facilities out there, but when you go to buy, you have a perception as to what you're going to get and whether care is being provided, and they put a a 72-page document in front of you. Now, you wouldn't even lease space in a warehouse without seeing on the bottom of the document. If you don't understand this, retain a professional, a lawyer, whoever it may be. Here's 72 pages that's going to affect your life for the next X, and you just sign it because you think that what you're getting is kind of what you've seen. And really, what it turns out to be is a gigantic real estate lease and a whole bunch of conditions about what they won't do and what they will do. Now, I'm not bashing the assisted living industry. There's a huge place for them, and people need it. But they need to understand whether they're buying a Cadillac, a Fiat, or whatever it may be.
Or a bicycle.
Or a bicycle. And if you don't understand what you're buying or what you're purchasing on behalf of a loved one, then it's very difficult to get not only, quote, the best deal, but to understand what it is that you can expect to have after you put your name on the bottom line and have started to pay money.
That is such an important part of managing those expectations of what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. And when you fly back to wherever it may be, even if it's driving around the corner, if that call comes, you better know what is going to be provided for you and what is going to be expected of you to take care of.
Well, that's the big problem in caregiving. And I think as, we're approaching the half-hour mark here, and I want everybody to know we're on WBZT 1230 AM, caregiverreality.com. And if you want to speak to us, it's 800-889-0267. We're going to move to a break, and when we come back, we've got some more adventures in the life of David Levy as a caregiver and some very interesting things to tell you that was in the news this week. So take it away, and we'll talk to you in another minute.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for him or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, and you just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, you've tried lawyers and mental health professionals, but now realize they don't have realistic, practical answers. What you need is an expert, non-clinical family caregiver, one with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself, one who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. His name is David Levy, and you can reach him at dlevy@caregivered.org. Caregiver ED is one word. Or call direct to 561-482-0086. That's 561-482-0086. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy. You can call in to speak with David on air, toll-free, at 1-800-889-0267. That's 1-800-889-0267. Again, here's David Levy and more of today's Caregiver Reality.
Go.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to Caregiver Reality with David Levy and Paul Vattiato here at WBZT at 1230 a.m. We're here every Tuesday night, and we look forward to having you join us either on the radio, through caregiverreality.com, iHeart, and many other different strategies. David, I have a really odd question that I want to ask you.
No, I will not kiss you.
No, I hope not. But, I was at the house the other day as you were getting ready
Right.
to prepare for the hospital stay for Suzette.
Right.
And I know how many dogs you have in the house.
Right, including me.
Yeah. And yet, when I walked in the house, it was fresh as a daisy. You got to tell me, how do you do that?
Well, I have a neighbor, and he has been, he's a phenomenal salesman. And he has picked up, as part of a product line, a piece of equipment that should be in every sick room, every home. It produces not only oxygen and kills off most bacteria and things like MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant staph, which we have, serious stuff, as well as the ordinary colds and flu. It's bacteriostatic, so that not only does it absorb odors, but the most amazing thing, when he brought it over to me, he said, I got to show you something. And I said, what is this, another, air conditioner? And he said, no, watch this. And he took an onion and he rubbed it on the back of his hand. Actually, it was on the back of my hand. And he said, all right, smell it. And it was a Vidalia onion. There was no mistaking it was an onion. He says, put it in front of the machine. 45 seconds later, he said to me, take it off and smell it. The smell was gone. It was amazing. Then he took a sponge and he poured ammonia on it. Well, you know how much ammonia stinks.
Sure.
And whether it's urine ammonia or cleaning ammonia,
they'd be the same.
It's just as obnoxious, and that's why it's in the little capsules that they use if you pass out. Those are ammonia capsules. And he said, smell it. I said, I don't have to. I know what ammonia smells like. And he put it back in front of the machine for about a minute and 20 seconds. The ammonia smell was gone. I was absolutely flabbergasted. I said, I need this. So he said, I'm going to lend it to you. All right, which is what I call a puppy dog sale. You put it in the house and you say, try it. And then he calls you up a week later and he says, I need to take it back. No, I can't do without it. And it turned out to be an incredible, incredible piece of equipment. Not only did it control the smells in the house, but my wife, who has, on top of everything else, really bad allergies, about day 2, she stopped sniffling. She didn't need her allergy pill. I'm not making it out to be bigger than life and more important than sliced bread. But it was a heck of a piece of equipment. And so what I did, because she's out of the house for the next couple of weeks, I went and I lent it to one of the facilities that I do support groups in. And I said, put this in the smelliest place you've got, all right, in one of the meeting rooms in a dementia facility. And so it's only been in there for 2 days. I got a phone call from her this afternoon, and she said, can we get more of these?
Wow.
And I said, well, I'm sure you can, but why? She said, you cannot believe the difference in 48 hours having that thing in here. So, folks, I'm not selling air purifiers, but I am so impressed with this, and they make a very small unit that goes in a sick room, and I think that anybody that has a loved one who's, in that sick room, that has incontinence, that has the normal odors that come from being in that kind of an environment, should have one of these. And so I'm trying to work out a situation where it'll be available on the Caregiver Reality website. It isn't yet, but I got to make a deal that makes it really worthwhile so that people can put it in their hands, try it, and if they don't like it, they can just return it. And I have to do a puppy dog sale, but figure out the best way to do it because we do have a national audience. But anyway, so much for the product, but I knew you'd notice the difference because it's just like night and day.
Yeah, it is like night and day, and it was when you showed it to me, the size of it really was impressive, and the fact that it works so well.
Right. My bloodhound couldn't find himself.
You referenced that article that came out of the Washington Post. I guess it was March 7th, Caregiving in America Heading Towards a Crisis. And there were a couple of points that really sort of struck me as I read them, and I'd like to share it with our audience, and I thought maybe after each point, maybe you can just give a comment as to what your take on it is.
And recall, if you will, that it started as the result of a speech that President Obama made, and caregiving has no politics. So it was very interesting, the comments that he did make.
Well, that's actually the first one that I wanted to read, because it was in the State of the Union that President Obama urged businesses, large and small, to offer employees more assistance with all types of family caregivers. It's time to do away with workplace politics that belong in a Mad Men episode.
Yeah, and that's very true. And we were discussing it not so much from a Mad Men episode a little bit earlier, but caregiving in the workplace is so prolific. So everywhere you look, there's a caregiver. And if the workplace doesn't recognize that this is what makes up its workforce to a great degree, we're going to have real problems going forward. Because trying to be competitive in a global world, when you have one foot in your job and one foot in your caregiving, and it's not something you can delegate. We can't send our caregiving issues to India and have them take care of them there, or to some other country that is willing to provide assistance at a lower price. You just can't outplace it.
Well, what about these employee assistance plans that many companies do offer their employees?
Well,
where do they fit in?
Well, employee assistance programs play a very important part. There are a lot of things that what are called EAP have a great part to play, and they offer you things like legal plans and the ability to deal with certain things that you may want, dental, etc. But when it came to caregiving, and it's been around for a while, and it's been one of my pet peeves, is that most employee assistance programs, rather than educate the caregiver, send them stuff. And I don't even mean stuff in the hard sense of books and literature.
Right.
They give them the name of 2 nursing homes and a geriatric case manager and say, okay, this is how you're going to take care of mom. But yet, you're not sure what you're buying. You're not sure where you're going. I learned a long time ago when I had a company called Adult Care, and we were dealing with folks all over the country. And I always viewed facilities as if I were the one going into them. Mm-hmm. And so one day, one of the individuals called up and said, I need some help. He happened to have been an insured under one of the products that we were dealing with. And I said, well, here are 3 in your area. And he called me back a day later, and he said something that was very important. He said, you didn't give me the name of, let's call it, Shady Acres that was down the block. And I said, well, I didn't think it was, when we evaluated, it was that good. He said, but it's right on my bus route. It's the right ethnicity, all right? The food is local in nature, and it's what mom expects. And I learned a lesson. Do not try and figure out for others what it is that they think they need. What you need to do is educate them on what it is that's being offered, and then give them a selection in your area, and don't limit it just because it doesn't meet what you feel sitting in a distance 1,000, 1,500 miles away from that individual, what he may have available or want in Nebraska and you're in Florida.
We tend to do that. I mean, just human nature. We may be here in Florida and we have a loved one, a sister or a brother who may be in New Jersey, and we're using our
Nobody's
yardstick.
in New Jersey.
Using our yardstick to judge what's appropriate for
No,
them.
I apologize to New Jersey, but I think one of the things, and we've tried to make responsible recognition of it, is that our program goes all around the country, and most of this country is rural. Most of this country doesn't have the kind of facilities and resources that we do here in Florida. So we can't just cater to our own backyard. We have to be realistic to recognize the caregivers are everywhere, whether that's Alaska, Wyoming, Wisconsin, wherever it may be, and that they don't necessarily have what we have here, because Florida's been the testing ground for aging and the response of the medical facilities, ground zero. And so what we have here, we cannot say to others, well, go around the corner and see this or see that, because around the corner may be the next cornfield. Right. And not a facility, and they may not even have anything except a local hospital 100 miles away.
If I may share a second point from this article, and this is close to my heart, because it's becoming such a tragedy and involves children. For parents of children with autism, overwhelming describes caregiving. I have to choose between caring for my child and taking care of my job. The hardest part of autistic caregiving is the realization that this might be forever.
Yeah, that's a very telling remark. And when you have special needs children or things that happen to people at a young age, and, it doesn't have to be children, but we talked about it last night with the elder law class. We were talking about the wounded warriors coming back, men and women that have fought in Afghanistan, fought in Iraq, and we can't forget those that fought in Vietnam, even though it was an unpopular war and people didn't like it. Those people suffered the same level of PTSD and other kinds of injuries, and they've been really rejected by society, and they're the ones that are living on the side of the road and in camps in the woods because people don't want them, just like the homeless in New York. Who do you think occupies the subways and the transformer vaults? There's a whole other world out there, not necessarily completely composed of caregiving, but let's call it a part of a rejected portion of society. Now that we have these young men and women coming back and they've had traumatic head injuries, they've had limbs lost, and because the medical profession has gotten so good at being able to keep them alive and give them artificial limbs, we think that, okay, well, they're back. But yet they have a lifetime of trying to adapt to what it is that they've been through, dealing with it mentally as well as physically, and look at their wife or their husband and their children. They have become caregivers for a good part of their lives in dealing with what happened to dad or mom or Uncle Fred or whatever, who was off fighting the good fight on our behalf.
Post-trauma stress disorder is going to be such an ongoing problem for the years to come. I'm sure the VA is just overwhelmed.
The VA is overwhelmed. And, you know, one of the people that we're dealing with, and I was so proud the other day, as you are as well, that we have formed a relationship with the medical research charities out of San Diego, which is the umbrella organization, as we've talked about, for many, many medical research diseases. And recently they've added in scripts in La Jolla for Alzheimer's, and they came to us to help with caregiving. And one of their members is ex-military and does a lot with the VA. And one of the things that we're hoping is that we will have the opportunity to lend to the VA the caregiving capability and information and resources that we've made available now to these medical charities on the website, and they've linked to us.
Why don't you give the website out while you see?
Well, it's caregiverreality.com. And it's medicalresearchcharities.org.
Plural.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And a wonderful organization. And they also deal every year with federal employees. They make it easy for a federal employee who wants to make a charitable contribution to a particular disease that may have affected the family or whatever, to be able to do that readily. And not so much that it affects us in quite that same manner, but we're right along with them and recognizing the caregiver, while the employee himself may be a caregiver, but also trying to do their best to support research in a disease that's affected them. I think it's a wonderful relationship. I'm really looking forward to building it and seeing where it goes. And
good people doing good things.
Right, and they were great people to align ourselves with. I was really pleased when they came to us. So going forward, you will hear us talk more about it because many of you are affected by the disease, the diseases that they're doing research in, or that they're the umbrella organization for. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to put your money where you really feel that it'll get the best bang for the buck and be very disease specific.
David, last week I had the pleasure of joining you at a local assisted living facility for a discussion group.
Right. Support group.
Well, no, I think it was more of a discussion than a support.
Okay.
And they were just so interesting, the people. But one of the people who were there was very confused in terms of who's who in the world of helpers. And she specifically said, if I knew I needed an aid, I would have asked for an aid. So in that hierarchy of who's out there to give us assistance, can you give us a quick rundown of who they are, what they might do, and the pay range that they normally would get?
Well, you know, first of all, it starts at the very top with nurses. It's hard. You know, yes, you have the Visiting Nurse Association, et cetera, to get really nurses to come into your home on a regular basis. First, they're getting scarcer, Secondly, they're becoming the front line of geriatric care, and that's why we're seeing them in the Walgreens and the CVS's, and these are the nurses who are nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, and whatever they're charging, they're worth. Right underneath them would be a licensed practical nurse. Most of them have moved on to become nurses rather than sit in the LPN or licensed practical nurse category. But once we get down to the certified nursing aide, that is the one we typically see most available for both the clinical help at home as well as practical help. Here in Florida, they'll run anywhere from $14.50 to $18 an hour. It depends on whether you contract with them directly or you get them through an agency.
Difference between the two?
Well, if you contract directly, then you have to figure out and do the background check, figure out exactly who they are. A lot of them don't really come with resumes, but you need to do your homework because you're letting somebody into your home or your loved one's home that you really need to know who they are and where they've come from and what they're doing so that they're not exploitive. And most of them are excellent, but you still have to know no more than you would do any differently if you were getting a nanny for your grandchild.
Stay off Craigslist.
Well, yeah, Craigslist is great if you're buying an armoire, but I wouldn't try and pick up a certified nursing aide from there. And then underneath there, you'll have a typical aide who's not certified nursing, but is more in the lines of helping to take care of somebody that doesn't require a lot of clinical. They're there to be not in the role strictly of companion, and they know enough to be, and maybe they've been trained in some Alzheimer's awareness, etc. And they'll run, depending upon where and when you can find them, between $10 and $12 here in Florida. And then you have your typical companion homemaker. And underneath that, you'd have the same kind of a person that you'd typically hire to be a house cleaner and maid and other kinds of services like that. But the individual that you were referring to had no idea that he could have hired an aide and kept his wife home longer. He only knew what he knew.
Exactly.
And it made his life very difficult because he didn't even know where to turn for assistance. This was not a dumb person. This was not somebody that was unaware. But this is not a set of skills and awareness that we typically have. We're born to be nurturers, and we're born to raise our children. But when it comes to long-term chronic care and how to deal with the system and how to guide yourself and where to find things, it's not very intuitive. And that's why there are many caregivers as there are that are burned out and frustrated because they just don't know where to turn. And part of what we're trying to do here, without being too self-serving, is to let people know that there are things available, that there are places to turn to, and if you can't, at least take a look at what we have to offer. We don't sell anything on the site with the exception of a caregiver workbook, the one that won the Council on Aging, only because it costs us. It'll be available, as I said last week, but it's finally going to Kindle on Friday.
Good.
So you should be able to pick it up and use it on Kindle for a price of about $4.95. I don't think we can make anything more affordable that will educate you or teach you as much as that book will. And I'm very pleased to be able to offer it and to be able to have people worldwide get it from Amazon Kindle or wherever it may come from once it's out there. And it's part of the thing that I feel is our contribution, even though it does put a few dollars back into Caregiver Reality, but it helps to pay for an awful lot of the pro bono that we do. And so I'm very pleased that it's out there.
Yeah, and I think you made such a valid point. For those of us who are caregivers, we're not alone. I mean, and that is the point that we keep forgetting. There are so many of us who are facing the same challenges day to day, and what we would like to try to do as a result of the book and the program is not try to have to reinvent the wheel every single day.
Right. Well, why should people have to reinvent the wheel? I mean, everybody needs to understand the ABCs. And from there, you can go on to your own level of spelling words and sentences. But if you don't have the basics, you can't grow. And it's just not intuitive, and there's not, a pill you can take that makes me caregiver smart. And so we're trying to fill in a gap that has long been needed and highly recognized, and do it in a way that is not exploitive of the caregiver. And I think that's the most important thing. There are a lot of people out there that want to sell you a lot of stuff, and you're smart people. But if you don't know what it is you're dealing with, then you're going to be the victim of opportunists, because everybody does not have a philanthropic heart or want to help just for the sake of helping.
And hope makes you very vulnerable.
Yes, when you are desperate and you don't know where to turn, you will grasp at straws. We're trying to eliminate some of that grasp at straws by setting people on the right path and showing them what are the ABCs of caregiving and what do they need to know, so that they can be smarter about it, so they can understand their options. Because as we continually say, if you understand your options, you can make wiser decisions, and wiser decisions give you the peace of mind that you did the best you could with what you had at the time you had to do it.
And sometimes those options may not be the best ones, but at least of the ones you have, you're able to make a decision because you're a little bit more informed.
Right. And you've been listening to us on Caregiver Reality on WBZT 1230 AM. We'll take a little break, and then we'll be back, and we've got a couple of things to tell you before we close out for the night. So hope you'll be back on the other side of the minute.
Where are we going?
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist with over 25 years of experience providing practical, realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one unable to care for him or herself. To reach David Levy online, go to info@caregiverreality.com. See you next week on Caregiver Reality.
Huh?
Well, get to it.
Okay. Well, we're back, and that was a quick minute, and you're listening to the Caregiver Reality Show, and our good friend in the control booth really, got it in and out quickly. I do want folks that are in our local area to know that there is a great caregiver seminar coming up a week from Thursday at the Arden Court in West Palm Beach. Well, that might not mean anything to anybody beyond our immediate local area. It's at 2330 Village Boulevard, and the subject happens to be Alzheimer's and sex.
Interesting.
I'm fearful of one and enjoy the other, but it's a subject that really needs to be discussed. And all you need to do is call 561-688-9999 and ask for the marketing director, and she will give you a reservation. If you do have a loved one that has dementia and you want to go, let them know, and they will afford you an opportunity to let your loved one be there with the other folks in the facility so that you can benefit from the presentation. And it's being done by a good friend of yours, Paul. Elise November.
Yeah.
Right, and she's
best.
phenomenal.
Yep.
And this is a subject that people look at very guardedly, and is something that really needs to be brought out in the open, both for the spouse as well as those that may be suffering, or the family, and to have a greater recognition of the role that sex plays in Alzheimer's. It's a very delicate subject, but one that's a reality, because with dementia, as dementia continues to move through our body and we lose what we call our social filters, people become much more primal. And sex is a very primary drive, and just like eating and survival. And so recognizing what it is that an Alzheimer's patient goes through and how a family can deal with it, as well as how spouses, recognizing that a loved one has a problem of mourning and how they want to deal with their intimacy. There's nobody better than Elise to be able to do this.
Can you give the specifics of when, where, and how to call again, please?
Yep, it'll be Thursday the 20th It will be in West Palm Beach at the Arden Court, and you just have to call 561-688-9999. Ask for Sunny. She's the marketing director. She will make a reservation for you, and if you want to bring your loved one with you and not have to worry that they're home alone, just let her know, and they'll make arrangements.
What time does it start?
I believe that it is 10:30 in the morning.
Okay.
All right.
Reservations are needed.
Reservations are needed because it's guaranteed to be a very popular subject matter, and they're doing it as a pro bono to the for the benefit of the community. It doesn't cost you anything to be there. Last thing I'd like to say, because I see we're down to 4 minutes. Today, I went in because I wanted to find out when I was there with my wife.
Oh.
All right, this is a great story. I came in with my advance directives and my durable power of attorney that says to the hospital. I plop them on the counter and I say I would like to see the record. I wanted to see what went on in surgery, why they couldn't get that pain pump in there. I got 2 minutes. I'm going to make this quick. Woman looked at me. She was polite as hell, and she says, I can't show them to you. I said, why not? Because your doctor didn't approve you looking at them. I said, but I have a right to them. I'm her designated surrogate and her durable power of attorney. Sorry. Not only do we have to wait for the doctor, but you can't look at them until a patient advocate is here, because I guess they're worried that I'm going to alter the record. So I called our good friend, Scott Solkoff, eminent elder law attorney, and I told him the situation. And tomorrow before I go, I have to stop at the office because he's going to put the attorney for the hospital on notice that these documents need to be recognized, and I have a right to look at them and see what they say without waiting for my doctor to say it's okay. But if they want somebody to stand there so that I don't alter what her blood pressure was or what her temperature was or whatever, I offered to be handcuffed and stricken of all pens, all right? All I want to do is read it. I look at it for everybody else, but they wouldn't let me look at it for her. And so I'm not looking to be a pain in the butt, but I'm making a point. Everybody that has those records has a right to the access. And even though the hospital has a protocol, there are laws in this state that say you can do it. And if they want somebody to watch me, fine. But I'm not going to wait around for 5 hours for one individual to finally make up their mind that they're going to come up to the floor and let me look. So if I'm crusading, yes, I am. Because
you're an advocate.
I'm an advocate. And, you know, once again, I don't care how much you know, I walked right into it today with the documents exactly the way I was, and boom, hospital policy. And, you know, it can't supersede the law, but I'm willing to play the game their way, but they're going to have to play the game the way the documents are written as well. So
that's the system.
That's the system. And, folks, I want you to know that we got to wind up tonight, but next week will be the next sequel of wife going and transferring to the nursing home. All right? Stay tuned for the adventure. Paul, always a pleasure.
Thank you,
Freddie,
David.
thank you. In the control room, you guys are great. And so we're going to say goodnight. We're going to say goodbye, but we're only out here to help you, and we'll see you again next week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Yep.
Darling, forever, forever. You can break my heart forever if you want to.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality. Each week, David Levy and Jerry Thomas.
Fox News Radio. I'm Ron Flatter. In a special election widely seen as a potential trendsetter for the nation, Republicans won a